Everybody's bullish about B2B events right now and face-to-face events. Face-to-face requests, according to Harvard Business Review, 34 times more successful than email campaigns for generating action on the buyer side. All that to me sounded like we are in the right business at the right time. We're poised for a great ride.
Strong companies, lasting partnerships, powerful events. Welcome to the Experience Builders Podcast.
Chris, we're fresh off of EDPA Access.
Still on a high, Khalil. That was a great event. Really it was just outstanding.
Yeah.
Let it better.
Yeah.
Great crowd, record turnout. We tried some new things that all seemed to be received well. So some of what I thought I'd share with you is some of what I learned at that event. But really just
looking out for 2025, and you brought in why don't you give the backdrop of kind of what happened at EDPA Access with The Economist?
Well, so this really dovetails with some of the observations I think all of us have seen, and then we were certainly hearing from some of the subject matter experts, like great economists that came and spoke at that event. But I'm also sitting in on the Exhibition Conferences Alliance board meetings. So you've got show organizers and show owners and globally a lot of players, and everybody's bullish about B2B events right now and face-to-face events. I suppose there are still folks that sort of benchmark everything post-pandemic, Khalil, right? So in the spirit, so the comments are, events are back in a big way, since pandemic. Well, I think they have been coming back, but no question, I've got some data I can share about, what the experts at, Harvard and McKinsey and the Boston group are sharing. And that came from our friends at, like I said, ECA. My good friend Hervé, who runs Emerald, shared some stuff on a call this week. So happy to share that. So I think the EDPA Access event was proof of what they're all talking about. I had people coming up to say the best event ever. I go to events all over the world, and this was a world-class event. And I'm talking about the speakers and the world. Just love the Grand Hyatt in Indian Wells, California, out in the Palm Springs area. The food was great. The interactive games, it was structured for networking, so tons and tons of networking opportunities throughout the 3-day conference. So it was a rave. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the president, Khalil, of the association. No, it really was great.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in. You already mentioned about the industry kind of outlook. What was the feedback that we heard from The Economist?
So, even before so sort of the macro view, in-person events, there's no question we're seeing CMOs and big brands back to spending more money there. And really for them, what we were discussing was the challenges that are driving things back to face-to-face event spending is, there's a declining effectiveness of digital advertising, many felt. There's algorithm limitations people are frustrated with. A lot of noise and clutter in the AI-driven lead generation lane. I think everybody's got email fatigue. And really, there's just an oversaturation of digital content that's out there. So it's prompting businesses to return back to one of the few places that they can still get face-to-face with their customers, because we had sort of moved away from that. So I thought that was interesting. Hearing things like paid search and display ads are much less. I mean, when's the last time you clicked on a banner ad at the top of a website? So I think that comment was very telling. And they just overwhelmingly, we were hearing senior marketing people are just seeing diminishing returns on the spend in the digital world. Gartner Group had a report out that said, again, a lot of the marketing executives are moving from digital channels to specifically to experiential marketing. They know buyers are liking that total immersion sort of engagement. Um, and about 2/3 of those executives are saying they plan on increasing their spend in that way in 2025. That's just great news for our industry. So there was a lot of excitement about that. I think that generally speaking, we heard that face-to-face events build trust faster and ultimately yield better business development opportunities. It's just a better environment for more meaningful business opportunities. Face-to-face requests, according to Harvard Business Review, 34 times more successful than email campaigns for generating action on the buyer's side. So all that to me sounded like we are in the right business at the right time. Um, Heard from some of the exhibitors that were saying they have seen a about a 30% increase in perceived value by
Mm.
their bosses, their teams, uh, in their trade show marketing. That's just from 29 to 2023. So ironically, that's during pandemic. And I thought about that. I go, well, there's way less events. How could that be? And you know what it is, Khalil? I think the decision makers realized we had to be without that really critical method of marketing to really appreciate what it was for us. I remember in the early part of pandemic, right? There was a lot of brands that were just saying, "Oh, we'll never go back to those cost centers, those big fat
Yeah.
cost centers, and we'll do everything digitally, and it's better and less travel budget and less this and that." And then enough time's gone by where you realize it's not working. We can't measure it's we can actually see a decline. So now that kind of, face-to-face event has gone from being a big cost center in your budget to a critical thing that you now have to do to get in front of your customers and hopefully get better
Yeah.
leads. So that's kind of the high level flyover. Um, Couple things I thought The Economist, which we had a great economist who great sense of humor, and I always appreciate that. And what do we used to say? An outgoing economist was someone who looked at your shoes while they talked to you rather than stared at their own, right? So this guy was really pretty funny. Um, but he came right out of the chute. He said, "Here's the great news. You 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 guys in the trade show and business event space are going to have a great 2025 and a great 2026. The market is going to be robust for what you do." He said you're going to see in 2025 in particular, we can expect to see more growth, lower rates. He really had forecasted, Khalil, that the right around the middle of the year, June 2025, he think is going to be the sweet spot. It's going to be the low point for inflation and interest rates. So if you were going to be looking at making any investments as part of your strategy, um, early to mid 2025 would be the time to do that. So the internal conversation my leadership team there had is, investing in process improvements, efficiencies. But he said, start to lock in your cost cutting strategy for the second half of the year because as you get to 2026, he said you will see in particular Q2 to Q4 in 2026, there will be an inflation rise. So you're going to want any cost cutting strategies already in place.
Mm.
Um, his suggestion was, I think he said, if you don't have an intentional, your company doesn't have an intentional price increase strategy in 2025, that would be a mistake because you're going to want that in place when costs start going up and inflation shows its head again in 2026. There's an interesting conversation about debt, Khalil, that, the experts say debt should spike during an emergency. Um, the housing market collapsed. You're going to see debt go up, whether it's be for your business or even your personal household. Pandemic, you're going to see debt go up. He said the concern that's creating a longer term problem that's very real. He called it the 2030 problem. Is we've been seeing debt rise these last years without a crisis, and everybody listening, all the Experience Builders listeners I know are aware of, the rising national deficit. The thing is, that's happening in almost every country right now. So the challenge is going to be, when that pendulum swings back, and the U.S. is used to counting on all these other countries buying our debt to help keep things going. Well, many of those countries are now selling their own debt, and they're not going to be buyers. That's where we're going to run into a problem in 2030. Wasn't encouraged to hear that. He did say, again, let's stick with 2025 for a minute. Second half of 2025, demand is going to be picking up. So get ready for that, whether that's your own capacity, equipment needs, space, labor. We talked a lot about labor. The labor situation is going to continue to be a challenge. He said, you're going to, we think we're still going to see wage inflation and a labor shortage keep climbing through 2029. He said, I would suggest you do a deep dive on the partnerships you have. So we're a partner to a lot of people, as you know, my company, Crew XP. We build for other people. So there may be people in their cost-cutting strategy that are going to be, downsizing on both talent and space, and maybe looking to not have those fixed costs and outsource. So I'm encouraged by that. But when the music stops, we're still going to be the guys with the big box facilities and needing the labor. So we have to navigate our way through there. But wage pressures for sure will continue. He talked about the demographics, baby boomers, and for those that aren't clear on that, those are the individuals born from 1946 to 1964. By 2030, they are going to be out of the workforce. And so that's a big problem and puts more pressure on labor. He talked about the demographic. If you're 25 to 54 years of age right now, they're all working. But the older demographic beyond that is working less. And by 2030, they'll be out of the workforce. 16 years of age to 24 years of age right now is declining in their work numbers. They're opting to not enter the job market that young. Well, how old were you, Khalil, when you got your first job?
I mean, I was mowing
First
lawns
paycheck.
and stuff at like 12 years old, but first like W-2 paycheck, 16.
16.
Yeah.
And did you always have a job from that point forward? A paycheck? Did you always find something where there was a paycheck?
I was always working. I mean, it wasn't always W-2, but yes, I was working.
Me too. I think I was about 13, and it was lawn care is what started.
Labor laws were a little more relaxed when you were getting started.
Well, and you know what? I think slavery was still, so we didn't call child services if I sweat too much, at 13 for the lawn guys down the street. But we just were grateful for the paycheck. And anyway, I think this is a group, at millennials and under, they opted to stay in school longer, maybe get the advanced degree. More people opting to stay at home. They maybe don't have the pressure to be out there and find the job, but it's created a different work ethic and a different expectation about, what you really need, how much you need to work and all of that. So,
you backing up real
go
quick.
ahead.
So we have all this opportunity, just thinking out loud here. We have all this opportunity with 2025, but it sounds like what I'm hearing, hey, there's going to be great demand, but make sure you increase your prices and make sure that you hold on to your people, meaning spend more money on them, most likely.
Yes.
So you could really dig yourself into a hole if you do not increase your prices, if you do not pay your people well, and you go and you sell all this work. So
yes.
Yeah. How are you thinking about this data for your company?
So one of the things I want to make sure we touched on was, so really, where are we going to choose to invest in our business in 2025 and even into 2026? And I think it's going to have to be people. And I don't think that doesn't mean a ton more people, although right now in our plan, that I'm submitting to my team, it's three new people. So it's about a 10% increase in our numbers. But
Mm.
with the labor market what it is, we're paying more for high achievers.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that. We've talked about this before with the future workforce issue. We're seeing that in the trade skills jobs on the show floor and in the back of the warehouse. We're seeing that I call it, in kind of the critical thinkers like project managers and, um, let's be honest, everybody's a project manager. I don't care if they're running your freight desk. You are
Sure.
if you're a mid-sized company and you have 150 storage customers, you are in the critical thinking and scheduling and project management business just in the transportation world. So, number one is people. Number two, I think we're going to be investing more than we have before in technology to try and automate and be more efficient in some of our processes. One of the
Do you know
great
what that looks like at all?
sessions
Like
that,
what specific technology or
yeah,
anything like that?
great. So, for example, um, we sat through friend of mine who's these guys have been guests on our show before, Jordan Walker
Mhm.
and Hunter McKinley,
Yeah.
right? That created Backtrack, the AI
Yeah.
booth, content capture software. So Jordan came out and spoke to our group on artificial intelligence, and he was great, man, because this wasn't a long lecture in theory. He talked about 5 things in 45 minutes that you could start using Monday morning. And so one of the things was captivating. Like one was called Clay, and he talked about that on our show. And is it
Yeah.
Zapier or Zapier? Zapier.
Yep. Zapier.
So, but you can use that technology to create workflows. I don't care if it's a lead and how you're going to follow up. I see that also being able to be used in the production side for sure, and the production planning and project management side. But rather than manual things or the way you've been doing it, there are automated ways to improve efficiencies and on how you're doing those things. So you're either doing them faster, maybe you're doing it with less people, or you can handle greater capacity because you're doing it more fast. That's one example I think
Mhm.
of technology.
Okay.
I think for us, we'll hit that size where um, we run a series of softwares or apps in our dashboard, Khalil. And I know the redundancy of having, 6 or 8 separate things that aren't one enterprise software. And so there might be redundancy 2 to 5 times of data entry. That's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff we got to shake out. And that's not inexpensive. And I recollect from other companies, friends, my old boss, who it was great to catch up with Chris Stone at the trade group. I remember when they went through an enterprise software change, David Beach and the Atlantic Exhibits guys, they went through it. I think Impact XM, when they were much smaller, they went through it. Everybody was spending well into 6 figures on an enterprise software. By the way, ironically, all 3 chose different solutions, but all 3 spent about the same and talked about really a 2-year painful process of
Yeah.
getting the behavior to change. Wouldn't go
Yeah.
wouldn't trade it for the world now because the data and the analytics for your own company are so great, but I know
Yeah.
that is in my future, and I, dread that leap. So, anyway, people, technology, I think, to be determined, any equipment expansion for us.
Okay.
But I think it's really the people, the tech, and focus on efficient processes.
So when you go into hiring, you think, you said 3 people, you're thinking
Yeah.
about investment into these people. What do you feel like is going to be different for you trying to find these 3 people? What kind of roles are you looking
Mm,
at? And um, maybe how are you approaching it different than previously?
great question. And man, you and I we've ridden the bull on this subject about hiring and talent. And by the way, I did there was a breakout session that so there was a business owners management forum. There's a couple hundred in the room. We broke into 8 different groups and topics. I ended up with the future workforce, and I didn't look at it as solving the macro problem for the industry. I sat down with 20 people, and we were talking about, how do you find the talent you're looking for? For me, it's 1 to 2 project managers. We had a great discussion, Khalil, about fractional versus full-time employees, whether
Yeah.
it's fractional CFO or chief marketing or whatever, and when do you pull the trigger on that? But here were
Mhm.
some of the takeaways I just jotted down from that hour discussion. Bar across the board, hire talent when you find it, then figure out
Mm.
where you're gonna plug them in. It's just too
Okay.
hard to find good talent. So I thought, because if you try and go looking for the specialized job at the intersection of those moments you need it, it's even harder, right? So, um, I know for some of our younger business leaders, startups where you go, "Well, I don't go looking till we have the business so we can afford to hire people." I think everybody has acknowledged you've gotta be prepared to lose money for 3 to 6 months on a new hire because 'cause you're not gonna know, right, until
Mm.
then. Um, so always be hiring, don't miss good talent. And what I heard most people were saying is there's 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day benchmarks, but, don't judge them every Friday, but figure out what the benchmarks are before you make a
Yeah.
go, no go decision. Hire for attitude. That reminds me of an episode you and I did. Are you hiring for skill set or mindset? And, we had agreed at that time. I think we said, you really get hired for your skill set, but they keep you for your mindset, which I see as attitude, right? So
Yeah.
there's the only, I was reminded the only thing more contagious than enthusiasm in an office is a lack of it.
Yeah.
So we don't want those culture carriers. Um, oh, I asked a question. Fire quickly if dot dot dot. And apathy was the thing I heard. If you're lazy, if you're if you're a culture killer, if you
Right.
just seem like you're doing the bare minimum or just waiting. It led to a discussion about how good are each one of us at onboarding and training, Khalil. So there's something that we have to get good. That's going to be a 2025 investment for me. I don't know if that's a
Well, and
software thing. Yeah,
I always think
what's
that's
your
the whenever you're dealing with the labor market where it's so hard to find the right people, that doesn't
yes.
necessarily mean that there's not people out there. It just means that there's not experienced people out there. And so if you can go and find people from different domains that have adjacent skill sets, complementary in some regard, but at least the right mindset and attitude and fit culturally with your company, then your onboarding and your training processes and programs are what allow you to have leverage in that market. If you have the more robust onboarding and training programs inside your company and your competitors don't, then you're going to be able to find and access more talent than they are to be able to execute on the work that you need. So that can be your competitive advantage is that, hey, we do a better job at onboarding and training our employees than anybody else. And whenever we find someone who has the right mindset, we train them to be the best in the industry. Right. And so
So
that's
this is
that's a
yeah.
really great
By the
part.
way, we will never win the award for being the best onboarders and trainers. And but this was part of the discussion is so many of us, Khalil, our companies are made up of a tribe of doers. Like we
Mhm.
all wear 3 or 4 hats and we do it because
Yeah.
we love it and we're all good at it. But the problem is we don't have dedicated people to make sure the new hire is onboarded and trained properly. So we turn to the doers and go, gonna need your help. And
Yeah.
your best PMs, your best field operators, your best warehouse operators aren't necessarily the best. You and I know they have the most wisdom and experience, so we see them as the best trainers. They may personality wise, they may not be the best trainers. So this is where I can say, personally speaking, this is where we have to improve. Even before we get to onboarding, I heard several people in my group regarding the subject of interviewing people. And here's my takeaway: owners should consider removing themselves from the early interviews. Why would they
Yes.
say that to me, Khalil?
To you, probably
Well,
too optimistic.
Well, definitely to me, but I think I
Yeah.
got,
I mean, it depends on
more
who you
now.
are, but from what I see, it's either too optimistic or too pessimistic, like, "Oh, they're not cut out for it, they're never gonna make it, they couldn't fit." Or probably for you and I, it's, "Oh, okay, like, yeah, this could really work out, like, great person, loved him, like,
Yeah,
I see all the
yeah.
potential in the world."
Well, and I think the expression was, "Chris, sometimes you need to just shut up about it." And
Yeah.
what I think they mean is, "I want you to wanna come work here if I'm interviewing. I've read your thing, you seem qualified." So in an early interview, I may be the last person that has to say, and that's
Yeah,
probably the right spot for me. But I'm gonna
sure.
tell you all the wonderful things about the company that in my mind, I built or I'm still building and what it could be, and who's not gonna wanna work there, right? But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, McMahon, man, he does it. He flips it, and he just goes, "Well, I read you're this, and, you do this, and you've got experience here. Why do you wanna work here?" And then he's quiet. And
Yeah.
now you're making that candidate sell themselves, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's a much better strategy.
You
But
wanna
I mean, if
sell you. You're making the candidate sell you as the
yes,
best option for them, not necessarily sell themselves. Yeah.
but if
I
you're
think
desperate,
also I think
say if you're
also
desperate for an account manager, sorry, if you're desperate for an account manager, do you go too far, buck them up and make them, in other words, I want you to show up and you got to be right fit. And maybe we don't give it enough room to breathe is I think what the lesson
yeah,
was, which I
no, for
totally
sure.
guilty of that. Sorry,
I think
what were
also
you going to say?
a lot of times as the owner, you might join those early interviews, but the reality is day to day, you're maybe not interacting with that employee that often. And it's the people that are going to be interacting with that employee every single day, day in and day out, that should be a part of those early interviews, to qualify, to make sure they're a good fit, to see that they're going to be a good member of the team and fit culturally and have the right mindset, all that kind of stuff. So, um,
You know what else came up? And this final thought just on the employees, um, remote working. So, and we've tackled this
yeah,
before. I think we
mhm.
had Noelle Webster on,
Noel, yeah,
and she changed my mind about, that a remote employee can be as committed and as contributory to the company, and in some cases goes above and beyond to prove, how committed they are, which
yeah,
is you have to be careful of. But 23 owners and leaders, in this table, I was shocked at the majority. I feel like this is moving backwards. It's not, they were just being honest. 90% were not fans of remote working.
yeah,
Everybody acknowledged there are some jobs that can, but the preference is still, I want people, and by the way, we talked about the training component. I need you to be in the office and around the people that you're gonna learn from. That was so we said, "How about a hybrid?" And again, I got a lot of head shakes where people said, "In this business." So I thought I so we went through a couple of jobs. Can a obviously a shop guy or girl can't be remote.
no,
I said, "But what can accounting person be remote?" "Yeah, they can." "Project manager?" They said, "No." I said, "None?" "No." "How about account manager?" "No." I said, how about the account director, the relationship, higher level relationship?" I was even getting no's for I said, "Well, they travel and they see." They said, "I need their influence to the people in the office. I
mm,
need their." So, I wasn't getting necessarily hard nose on all those, but I was getting, we think it hurts our company with that. I said
and who
designers
is
because we've got
giving you this?
freelance
This isn't The
designers.
Economist speaking. Who's sharing this information
No,
with you?
no, this is the roundtable of,
Okay.
EDPA member companies that were, and that everybody has it, and, I know they're grateful for their employees, but so designers, again, I said, "You're saying no." But I said, I know all of you use freelancers. We've got great designers all over the world." And they said, "There's nothing like a designer sitting down face to face in a discovery meeting or concept meeting, or being in the back of a shop and helping to work through how something's going to be fabricated." "Well, can't you do that?"
Yeah,
And they're like, "Yeah, you can." But so anyway, it was
it's
just,
tough.
my takeaway was, what a surprise, because I thought we sort of had accepted this, and
Mhm.
it is accepted, but I wasn't prepared for. the strong preference that exists for still.
Well, especially in an industry that values face to face so much.
Well,
Um,
well, there's that
I
too,
think
right?
that's a big reality for it. I think if you're in an industry where that's not the norm or the expectation, then
Yes.
remote might have a different place. But I also think there's different roles that really do matter. And it's very difficult when you're in companies that have roles that are required to be face to face, like someone who, and face to face isn't even the right word, required to be in a physical location. And then you have employees that aren't. It can cause a lot of division culturally. So it might
Well,
be something you see
the
a
g-
lot more of in 2025 for the return to the even larger, what's the acronym? But return to office, RTO,
yeah.
whatever. So
Well, the good news is for 2025 on the customer side, in event and advertising spend is up. Face to face event spends are up. Um, and that seems to be the expectation of the trend, at least for the next 2 years. So um, we know. So did we talk about the 2030 event? I don't want to end on a down note, but the sobering point on the 2030 event is there will be an economic correction of great significance, um, is what we were told. And I've heard this from more than just the economists that spoke to us. They said that unfavorable variance, I'm quoting my friend Dan Sarabin, CFO of Durfee, who's been on our show, but that's a polite phrase for um, what the economist was saying could well be a 6-year negative period for the U.S. economy. So
mm,
that doesn't mean it's straight decline for 6 years, nosedive, but it will be a steady decline, and there'll be a little up instead. But it won't be a lot of fun. I equated it to well, it's probably they were describing what could be harder times or new problems we haven't experienced. But the good news is, for those future leaders that are listening and those coming into the industry, after that period of economic correction, um, and he said this could be 2036 coming out of it, an opportunity for extraordinary wealth building, both
yeah.
for companies, brands, people that are making their livings in that resurgence. So I think if you're in business long enough, you're going to get the ups and downs. So
So
anyway, it was an
around
interesting.
2030,
Yeah.
a downswing for about 6 years, up
So,
and down, but
so yes,
generally trending down. But 2025, a lot of hope,
20.
expectations.
Yeah. So really,
2026,
between
a lot of
now and
hope, expectations.
2029. Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Next 2 years, a pilot would call it severe clear. Right. It means the skies are so clear you can see all the way. That's for you, Brad Fallberg of Exhibitus, if you're listening, my piloting friend. Severe clear for 25, 26,
To
27,
29.
28, little further out, but again, no expectation. If good things happen with tax policy, if the U.S. is not entering wars, if we're not spending money the way we've been spending, and we're practicing more
Yeah.
fiscal discipline, this is this there's we're poised for a great ride. But at some point, all that money that we've pumped into the trillions and trillions, and that the world has pumped in recovering from pandemic, there's a bill we're going to pay. And so, what are we doing in the next 2 years to get our businesses ready for probably some other turbulence in 2026 with some inflation? But again, we've ridden that out the last several
Mhm.
years, and I think most people would say it's been good times or positive economic times. So, yep. So that's again, 2025 outlook is I'm river dancing and yodeling, Khalil. I'm ready to celebrate. No, really feeling good about entering next year and see it as an opportunity. We're going to get some new talent. We're going to use technology to be more efficient and better
Yeah.
support our customers. There may be a new investment. If some of you are looking at an acquisition of maybe a small company or branching into a new group, 2025 might be a good year to do that if it's not a big spend without an immediate return because we want to have our costs in control going into 2026. Um, Made perfect sense when we heard it, and I think it's a good reason to be positive about the
Yeah.
future.
One kind of final thought here, Chris. Where are we at in the industry compared to pre-pandemic levels?
Great point. I don't have 2024 numbers in yet, but I do know just as a whole, our immediate lane was, I think we were a $101 billion contributor to the US economy in 2019. And that's mostly, you know, trade show exhibit marketing. There's
Right.
beyond that, and that includes some of the hotels spends and the travel and all that. We were back at 78 billion in
Okay.
2023, right? So this has been a good year. I asked my friend Tommy Goodwin, who spoke, our government affairs expert with Exhibition and Conferences Alliance. I think I think the macro number is something like $780 billion contributor to
Wow.
the North American economy. That expands that out a little more to airlines, and it's not
Right.
just venues and
Yeah.
booths and graphics and so this gets deeper into
So
hotels and
78,
venues.
we're at roughly 78% of what we were at in
Yeah,
2019,
I think I
and
think I
25
yep.
seems to be like maybe we'll be getting even closer towards that
I
100%.
think 2025 is poised to where we could actually see some new benchmark numbers as to
Okay.
what this industry, contributes to the US economy. Yeah,
Very cool to see. And how would you
great.
say that aligns with your company? Obviously you've made a lot of changes, and yeah, there's a lot of change in your company in general, but how would you say you feel as a business owner in this industry? Do you feel like 2024 is we're back up to 2019
Well, I'm
levels, or how
I'm
are we doing?
I would be content with just 1% of that macro number, Khalil. So
Yeah, I'm
And
sure
we
you
and
would.
we got a ways to go for that. No, I think, so we're gonna finish up as a company about 11% growth this year.
Excellent.
We made some strategic investments last year, for example, doubling our space in Las Vegas. And if you know commercial real estates, that's a big spend. So we were paying for that this year, but I think we were able to support the growth because we made
Mhm.
that investment. And so we look for that to be something that continues to grow. Made a big investment in inventory. So you know, I I think all of us are looking at, can we continue to grow with what we have? So remember, I'm
Mm.
spends we're going to make are going to be on things hopefully to make us more efficient, and ultimately that's going to save us money. And the big thing is, will it allow us to better support our customers faster, better solutions, more flexibility, and we think it
Yeah.
will. So for my company, I'm very bullish about 2025. Everybody at the conference we just saw was convention centers. I ran into my friend Mark Tester on the plane back, who is the executive director of the Orange County Convention Center, the Orlando Convention Center here. He was just coming from Austin. He said Austin's getting ready to level their convention center, and he used to run that and build a new one. So,
Wow.
you are seeing states and counties investing
Yeah.
in our method of marketing, which is,
Yeah. I'm here in Oklahoma City. We just did a huge
ex-
convention center in downtown Oklahoma City. So,
really.
um, the not the number one place to visit, but it is there. So,
No, but there were, I don't know the current number, but last count was, I think before pandemic, we were at over 13,000 events happening in the trade show world, every industry you can imagine. There's lots of regional events in the Oklahoma City's a beautiful city, people, and there
yeah.
seems to be a trend the last couple years, people, Nashville's just white hot these days.
Yeah.
We had a great
Nashville
event
is
in
white.
Louisville, right? Louisville and Memphis and some of what used to be called secondary markets, people are loving that because there's a so I think Oklahoma City absolutely has every chance to get a piece of this business.
Okay,
So,
2025.
do you have enough
Oklahoma
room at
City.
your house if I'm coming in for that? Can we
Yes,
stay?
please.
Sure,
Absolutely.
okay.
Not just you, any listener.
Everybody needs a side hustle, Khalil, you know,
Yeah,
little Airbnb. No, I
that's great.
appreciate you doing this. I always like to, it's the end of the year and, rather than a look back, I love to look forward. And,
Yeah,
it's severe clear skies for 2025 for us. So,
love it. Well, thanks for sharing all the data, Chris, and all your thoughts
yeah.
and how you're approaching it. Yeah, hope 2025 is exceedingly profitable for you.
Well, for both of us anyway, and all our
Oh, brother.
listeners. So, thanks
Yes.
again. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Okay,
See you on the
thanks.
next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Experience Builders podcast. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great content. Visit our website at crewxp.com to learn more about us. See you in the next one.